So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. In the shadow of Red Mountain, where the ash falls like silent snow, ancient prophecies linger in the air, whispered by wind, remembered by stone, and dreamt by those who dwell beneath the mountain's gaze. The land of Vvardenfell is a place of paradox, where the world's wounds are both hidden and revealed, and where memory clings to every stone and every grain of ash. Here, time seems to move differently, as if the mountain's heartbeat sets its own rhythm, slow and deep, echoing through the centuries. The people who live in the mountain shadow have always known that their lives are shaped by forces older and deeper than themselves. The Ashlanders, with their weathered faces and eyes that reflect the shifting sky, tell stories by the flickering light of campfires. Their voices are low and steady, carrying the weight of generations. They speak of a time before the tribunal, before the great houses, before the cities of stone and glass rose from the earth. In their stories, the land itself is alive, watching, waiting, remembering. It is said that the first dreams came long ago, before the names of gods and demons were known. In those days, the mountain was a place of pilgrimage and fear, a place where mortals glimpsed the divine and the terrible. The Chimerer, ancestors of the Dunmer, would climb the slopes in silence, leaving offerings of bone and salt at the steaming vents. They believed that the mountain was a gateway, a place where the world of flesh touched the world of spirit. And in the darkness beneath the earth, something ancient listened. The prophecies began as whispers, soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. Wise women and dreamers would wake in the night, their hearts pounding, their minds filled with visions of fire and shadow. They saw a figure masked and silent, standing at the heart of the mountain, his eyes burning with a light that was not of this world. They saw the land split open, rivers of ash flowing across the plains, and the sky darkened by storms that never ended. Some said these were warnings. Others believed they were promises. As the years passed, the dreams grew stronger. Children would wake screaming, their bodies slick with sweat, their eyes wide and unseeing. Elders would sit in silence, their faces etched with fear and wonder, as if they could feel the mountain's breath on their skin. The story spread from camp to camp, from village to village, until all who lived in Vvardenfell knew the name of Dagoth Ur. To some, he was a demon, a bringer of plague and madness. To others, he was a god, a savior who would remake the world in fire and ash. The mountain itself seemed to change as the prophecies took hold. The air grew thick with ash, and the ground trembled with a hidden pulse. Plants twisted into strange shapes, their leaves blackened and brittle. Animals fled the slopes, their eyes wild with fear. Even the wind seemed to carry secrets, its voice rising and falling in patterns that no one could understand. The people watched and waited, their lives shaped by the knowledge that something was coming, something that would change everything. In the deepest caves, where the light never reached, the dreams became reality. There, beneath layers of stone and memory, the Heart of Lorkhan pulsed with a power that defied understanding. It was said that those who touched the heart would be changed forever, their bodies and souls remade in the image of the divine. Some sought this power, believing it would bring them glory and immortality. Others feared it, knowing that such gifts always came with a price. The Ashlanders, keepers of the old ways, guarded their secrets closely. They spoke in riddles, their words layered with meaning and mystery. They knew that the prophecies were not just stories, they were warnings, guides for those who would walk the path between worlds. The wise women traced symbols in the ash, their fingers moving in patterns passed down through generations. They listened to the wind, to the earth, to the silence between heartbeats. And in their dreams, they saw the face of Dagoth Ur, masked and silent, waiting in the darkness. As the prophecies spread, they began to shape the lives of all who lived in Vvardenfell. Merchants and warriors, priests and thieves, all felt the pull of the mountain, the sense that their fates were bound to something greater than themselves. Some tried to ignore the dreams, to bury them beneath the routines of daily life. But the mountain would not be denied. Its voice was everywhere, in the rustle of leaves, in the crackle of fire, in the hush of midnight. It called to those who would listen, promising power, knowledge, and transformation. In the great cities of stone and glass, the tribunal priests watched with growing unease. They saw the signs, the flickering of the ghost fence, the rise of strange diseases, the whispers of rebellion among the people. They knew that the prophecies spoke of change, of the end of old orders and the birth of something new. Some tried to suppress the stories, to silence the dreamers and wise women. But the dreams could not be stopped. They flowed like water, finding cracks and crevices, seeping into every corner of the land. The mountain watched and waited, its secrets hidden beneath layers of ash and stone. It remembered everything, the rise and fall of empires, the betrayals and sacrifices, the hopes and fears of countless generations. And in the darkness beneath the earth, Dagoth Ur dreamed. His dreams were not like those of mortals. They were vast and deep, filled with visions of worlds remade, of gods and mortals joined in purpose, of wounds healed and wounds reopened. He saw the future as a tapestry, each thread woven with care and intention, each moment shaped by the choices of those who walk the land. The prophecies of Dagoth Ur are not simple things. They are living, breathing stories, shaped by the hopes and fears of those who tell them. They are warnings and promises, guides and mysteries. They speak of a world on the brink, a world waiting to be remade. And in the shadow of Red Mountain, where the ash falls like silent snow, the people of Vvardenfell listen. They listen to the wind, to the earth, to the silence between heartbeats. They listen, and they wait, knowing that the future is coming, one dream at a time. Long before the tribunal's rise, the Chimer people gathered around their campfires, sharing tales of a time when gods would walk among mortals and the land itself would tremble in anticipation. In those ancient nights, the world was younger, the stars brighter, and the boundaries between the mundane and the divine felt thin as gossamer. The Chimer, ancestors of the Dunmer, lived in scattered clans across the volcanic wilds of Restain, their lives shaped by the rhythms of the land and the ever-present shadow of Red Mountain. Each evening, as the sun bled behind the jagged peaks and the sky deepened to indigo, families and wanderers would draw close to the warmth of flickering flames. The firelight danced across their golden skin, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord, as if echoing the spirits invoked by the stories. These were not mere diversions or idle entertainments. For the Chimer, storytelling was a sacred act, a way to remember, to warn, and to bind the community together. The tales they told were woven from the threads of memory and myth, passed from elder to child, from priest to hunter, each retelling adding new layers of meaning. Around the fire, voices would rise and fall in a cadence as old as the land itself, recounting the deeds of ancestors, the mysteries of the Daedra, and the omens that shaped their fate. On certain nights, when the wind carried the scent of ash and distant thunder rumbled from the mountain, the stories turned to prophecy. The elders would hush the children and speak in low, reverent tones of a time before time, when the gods, both Edra and Daedra, walked openly among mortals. They spoke of Bothia, the prince of plots, who led the Chimer from the tyranny of the Edra-worshipping Aldmer, teaching them to embrace change and seek their own destiny. They spoke of Azura, the queen of twilight, whose prophecies shaped the path of their people, and of Mephala, the web spinner, whose secrets wove through every shadow. But above all, they spoke of the mountain, the great volcano that loomed over the land, its slopes shrouded in mist and mystery. To the Chimer, Red Mountain was more than a landmark. It was a living presence, a silent witness to the struggles and triumphs of their kind. Some believed it was the resting place of Lorkhan's heart, a source of divine power and the root of all prophecy. Others saw it as a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds grew thin and the voices of gods and spirits could be heard in the crackle of fire and the sigh of wind. The prophecies that circled the campfires were many and varied, but all spoke of a coming age of upheaval. They told of a masked figure who would rise from the ashes, neither wholly alive nor dead, bearing the power of the mountain itself. Some said this figure would bring ruin, others that he would bring salvation. All agreed that his coming would mark the end of the old ways and the beginning of something new, a time when the land would tremble and the fate of the Chimer would hang in the balance. Children listened wide-eyed as the elders described visions seen in dreams. Rivers of fire flowing down the mountain's flanks, cities swallowed by ash, and a great shadow spreading across the land. They spoke of the Sixth House, a clan shrouded in secrecy, whose members vanished into the mountain's depths, returning with eyes that glowed in the darkness and voices that echoed with prophecy. They spoke of Dagoth, a name that would one day become legend, whispered in fear and awe. The stories were not always grim. Some told of times when the gods walked in peace among the Chimer, sharing wisdom and laughter, teaching them the secrets of magic and the ways of the world. There were tales of Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil, heroes who would one day become gods themselves, but who in those days were still mortal, striving and dreaming like the rest. Around the fire, the line between history and myth blurred, and the listeners felt themselves part of a great tapestry, their lives woven into the destiny of their people. Night after night, the stories continued. Some were warnings, urging vigilance against the temptations of power and the dangers of pride. Others were comforts, reminders that the Chimer were not alone, that the spirits of their ancestors watched over them, guiding their steps. And always, beneath the words, was the sense of waiting, the knowledge that something vast and ancient stirred beneath the mountain, that the prophecies would one day come to pass. As the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, the Chimer would fall silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The elders would gaze into the embers, seeing visions only they could understand, while the children drifted into sleep, their dreams filled with gods and heroes, with ash and fire. In the quiet that followed, the land itself seemed to listen, holding its breath in anticipation of the days to come. Thus, in the long centuries before the tribunal's rise, the Chimer kept their vigil. Through story and song, through ritual and remembrance, they prepared for the time foretold in prophecy, a time when gods would walk among mortals, and the land itself would tremble in anticipation. And in the shadow of Red Mountain, the future waited, patient and silent, as the first stirrings of destiny began to shape the world. Among these tales, one name echoed with both dread and fascination: Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, whose dreams wove through the heart of Vvardenfell like threads of smoke curling through the night sky. His name was not always spoken aloud. In the earliest days, when the Chimer still wandered as nomads beneath the looming presence of Red Mountain, Dagoth was a figure glimpsed in the corner of the mind's eye, a shadow at the edge of the firelight, a whisper that lingered after the telling of a tale. The elders would lower their voices when his legend arose, for to speak of the Sharmat was to invite dreams that were not one's own, dreams that crept in unbidden, as soft and inexorable as the fall of ash. The stories of Dagoth Ur were never simple. They wound through the generations, changing shape like the smoke that curled above the campfires. To some, he was a betrayer, a lord of nightmares who had turned against kin and god alike. To others, he was a visionary, a prophet who had glimpsed truths too terrible for the waking world. But all agreed that his dreams were powerful, dreams that could cross the boundaries of sleep and waking. binding the hearts of mortals to the slow, volcanic pulse of Red Mountain. The chimer told of a time before the tribunal, when the gods themselves walked among mortals and the land was alive with possibility and peril. In that age, Dagoth Ur was not yet the Sharmat, not yet the enemy of gods and elves. He was Dagoth, a lord of House Dagoth, wise and proud, a companion to Nerevar and a guardian of the secrets buried deep within the mountain. The tale spoke of his loyalty, his cunning, and his fierce devotion to the land of his birth. But they also spoke of his dreams, visions that came to him in the silent hours before dawn, when the world was still and the heart of the mountain beat loudest. It was said that Dagoth Ur could see into the future, that he dreamed of a world remade by fire and ash. In his visions, the old order fell away, and a new age rose from the ruins, a world where gods and mortals were joined, where the wounds of the past were healed by the power of the heart. Some feared these dreams, calling them omens of doom. Others were drawn to them, sensing in Dagoth Ur a force that could not be denied, a destiny that would shape the fate of Vvardenfell for generations to come. As the years passed and the tribunal rose to power, the stories of Dagoth Ur grew darker. The elders spoke of betrayal and loss, of a great battle beneath the mountain and a secret that could not be buried. They told of how Dagoth Ur vanished into the depths, his body consumed by the power of the heart, his mind lost in dreams that never ended. But even in his absence, his influence lingered. The ash storms grew fiercer, the land more restless. People began to dream of Dagoth Ur, dreams filled with fire and shadow, with voices that called from beneath the earth. These dreams were not like ordinary dreams. They were vivid and insistent, haunting those who received them. Some awoke in terror, their hearts racing, the taste of ash on their tongues. Others felt a strange sense of longing, as if they had glimpsed a truth that lay just beyond their grasp. The wise women of the Ashlanders warned that to dream of Dagoth Ur was to risk losing oneself, to become a sleeper, caught in the web of the Sharmat's well. Yet, not all resisted. Some welcomed the dreams, believing that Dagoth Ur offered a path to power, to understanding, to a world remade in the image of the mountain. They gathered in secret, whispering prayers to the Sharmat, seeking visions of the future he promised. These followers became known as the Sleepers, their minds bound to Dagoth Ur's will, their fate entwined with the slow, inexorable unfolding of his prophecy. As the prophecy spread, so too did the fear and fascination that surrounded Dagoth Ur. His name became a talisman, a warning, a promise. To speak it was to acknowledge the power of dreams, the danger of visions, the possibility that the world could be changed by the will of a single, dreaming mind. And so the tales continued, winding through the generations like smoke, shaping the lives of all who lived in the shadow of Red Mountain. In the end, Dagoth Ur's greatest power was not his mastery of magic or his command of the heart, but his ability to dream, a dreaming that reached into the hearts of mortals, binding them to his vision, drawing them into the web of prophecy that would one day shake the world to its core. And as the ash fell and the mountain brooded, the people of Vvardenfell listened to the stories, wondering what dreams might come, and whether they would be strong enough to resist the call of the Sharmat. The first prophecy spoke of the Heart of Lorkhan, a divine spark buried deep within Red Mountain, its pulse felt in the dreams of seers and the restless sleep of Ashlanders. In the earliest days, when the world was still raw and the chimer wandered the ashen wilds, the Heart of Lorkhan was not yet legend, but a mystery sensed in the marrow of the land. The mountain brooded over Vvardenfell, its slopes veined with rivers of fire and its summit crowned with a perpetual shroud of smoke. The chimer, ever wary of the mountain's moods, believed that deep within its molten heart lay a fragment of the divine, a piece of Lorkhan himself, the trickster god whose schemes had shaped the fate of all mortals. Around the campfires, elders spoke of how the gods had conspired to create Mundus, and how Lorkhan, ever restless, had been punished for his ambition. His heart, torn from his chest, was cast into the earth, landing where Red Mountain would one day rise. The mountain's ceaseless rumbling, its unpredictable eruptions, were said to be the heartbeat of Lorkhan, echoing through stone and ash, calling to those with the wit to listen. Seers and wise women, attuned to the subtle rhythms of the world, began to dream of the heart. Their visions were vivid and strange, a pulsing light in the darkness, a rhythm that matched their own heartbeat, a sense of yearning that could not be named. They spoke of a power that could remake the world, a force that drew gods and mortals alike. Some awoke from these dreams trembling, unable to shake the sense that something vast and ancient was watching, waiting, deep beneath the mountain. The Ashlanders, keepers of the old ways, held these dreams in reverence and fear. They believed that the heart was both a gift and a curse, a source of unimaginable power, but also the root of all suffering. The restless sleep of their shamans was filled with omens, rivers of ash flowing backward, the sky torn open by lightning, voices chanting in a language older than memory. They read the patterns of falling ash, the flight of cliff racers, the shifting winds, searching for signs that the heart was stirring. Among the settled Dunmer, the legend of the heart took on new forms. Scholars and priests debated its nature, some calling it a myth, others insisting it was a relic of the gods, hidden away to protect, or endanger, the world. The tribunal, newly risen to power, sought to control the story, weaving it into their own mythos. But even they could not silence the dreams. The heart's pulse was felt in every corner of Vvardenfell, a presence that defied doctrine and denial. As the years passed, the prophecy spread. Travelers brought tales of strange lights seen on the slopes of Red Mountain, of voices calling from the depths, of dreams that left them changed. Some claimed to have glimpsed the heart itself, the jewel of fire and shadow, beating in the darkness like a living thing. Others spoke of a masked figure, neither alive nor dead, who moved through the dreamscape, his footsteps echoing the rhythm of the heart. The wise understood that the heart was not merely an object, but a force, a nexus where the mortal and the divine met, where the boundaries between dream and waking, life and death, grew thin. To dream of the heart was to be touched by destiny, to feel the pull of something greater than oneself. Some resisted, clinging to the safety of the known. Others surrendered, letting the dreams guide them toward an uncertain future. In the silence before dawn, when the world held its breath, the pulse of the heart could be felt most keenly. It was a longing that filled the air, a promise and a warning, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. The Ashlanders gathered in their yurts, the seers sat in meditation, and all who dreamed of the heart waited, knowing that the prophecy was only beginning to unfold. For beneath Red Mountain, the divine spark waited, patient, eternal, its pulse echoing through the dreams of mortals, shaping the fate of Vvardenfell and all who called it home. As centuries passed, the sixth house faded from memory, but the dreams persisted, growing stronger with each generation, as if the mountain itself remembered what mortals had forgotten. Time moves differently in the shadow of Red Mountain. The seasons change, empires rise and fall, and generations pass like leaves on the wind. But the mountain endures, silent, watchful, remembering. In the years following the battle at Red Mountain, when Nerevarine fell and the tribunal rose to power, a great forgetting swept across Vvardenfell. The name of House Dagoth, once proud and noble, was struck from official records, its holdings redistributed, its members hunted down or driven into exile. The tribunal temple, newly ascendant, worked diligently to reshape history, to cast the sixth house as traitors and heretics, unworthy of remembrance. In the great cities of stone and glass, the forgetting was nearly complete. Children grew up without hearing the name Dagoth spoken aloud, save in whispered tales meant to frighten them into obedience. Scholars who dared to question the official narrative found their work censored, their careers ended, their voices silenced. The temple's inquisitors were thorough, rooting out any remnants of sixth house sympathy, burning ancient texts, and replacing them with approved histories that glorified the tribunal and vilified their enemies. Yet, in the remote villages that dotted the Ashlands, where the temple's reach was weaker, fragments of memory persisted. Elders would sometimes speak of the time before, when House Dagoth stood among the great houses, respected for their wisdom and their mastery of ancient magics. These stories were told in hushed tones, around fires that burned low, when the night was deep and the eyes of the temple were turned elsewhere. They spoke of Dagoth Ur not as a demon, but as a lord who had seen too deeply into the mysteries of the heart, who had been changed by what he discovered there. But even these fragmented memories grew fainter with each passing generation. Elders died, taking their stories with them. Villages were abandoned as the ash storms grew more frequent, more violent. The ghost fence rose, a shimmering barrier that separated the heart of Vvardenfell from the blighted lands around Red Mountain. The tribunal, in their wisdom, declared the mountain forbidden, a place of danger and corruption, and the people obeyed, turning their backs on the past, focusing instead on the present, on survival in a land that grew harsher with each passing year. Yet, as the conscious memory of the sixth house faded, the dreams began. At first, they were subtle, whispers at the edge of sleep, images that lingered like afterimages when the eyes are closed. A masked figure standing on a mountain slope, a heart beating in darkness, a voice calling from beneath the earth. Those who experienced these dreams often dismissed them as meaningless, the random firings of a tired mind. But as the years passed, the dreams grew stronger, more insistent, more coherent. Children in Balmora would wake crying, speaking of a man with a golden mask who had shown them wonders and horrors beneath the mountain. Fishermen in Hlaod found themselves drawing strange symbols in the sand, symbols they had seen in dreams but could not explain when awake. Traders traveling the ash wastes reported hearing voices on the wind, calling them toward Red Mountain with promises of power and revelation. The temple attributed these phenomena to stress, to superstition, to the natural fears of the people living in the shadow of a volcano. Their priests offered comfort and reassurance, reminding the faithful that the tribunal watched over them, that the ghost fence protected them from the corruption that lurked within the mountain. But privately, the temple's highest authorities grew concerned. The dreams were spreading, becoming more common, more detailed, and they all seemed to center on the same figure, Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, whose name had been all but erased from history. In the secret archives beneath the temple in Vivec City, the oldest records told of how Dagoth Ur had not truly died in the battle at Red Mountain. His body had been destroyed, but his spirit had somehow bound itself to the Heart of Lorkhan, entering a state that was neither life nor death. The tribunal had believed him defeated, his power broken. But what if they had been wrong? What if, in the long centuries of his imprisonment, Dagoth Ur had found a way to reach out, to touch the minds of the living? The dreams continued to spread, like ripples in a still pond. They crossed boundaries of class and culture, affecting nobles in their mansions and beggars in their hovels. Even some of the temple's own priests reported disturbing visions, though they dared not speak of them openly for fear of being accused of heresy. The dreams were no longer random or disconnected. They told a story of betrayal and revenge, of power and transformation, of a world remade in fire and ash. And always, at the center of these dreams, stood the mountain. Red Mountain, Dagoth's domain, the place where the heart of Lorkhan beat its slow, eternal rhythm. In the dreams, the mountain was alive, conscious, watching. It remembered what mortals had forgotten, the battles fought on its slopes, the blood spilled in its depths, the promises made and broken beneath its shadow. The mountain remembered, and through the dreams, it shared its memories with the people of Vvardenfell. Some resisted the dreams, clinging to the teachings of the temple, to the comfort of the familiar. Others embraced them, sensing in these visions a truth that had been hidden from them, a connection to something ancient and powerful. A few went further, forming secret cults dedicated to the worship of Dagoth Ur, seeking to understand the message hidden within the dreams. These cultists were hunted by the temple, their gatherings broken up, their members imprisoned or executed. But for every cult that was destroyed, another seemed to arise, drawn together by shared visions, and a growing sense that the world was about to change. As the Third Era drew to a close, the dreams reached a crescendo. They came not just in sleep, but in waking moments, flashes of vision that would overtake a person in the middle of their daily tasks, leaving them disoriented and shaken. The temple's healers were overwhelmed by the number of people seeking help, claiming to hear voices, to see figures that weren't there, to feel a presence watching them from the shadows. And in the deepest chambers of Red Mountain, where the Heart of Lorkhan pulsed with ancient power, Dagoth Ur stirred. His physical form, destroyed centuries ago, had slowly reformed, drawing strength from the heart, from the dreams of the people, from the very memory of the mountain itself. He was no longer merely a spirit bound to the heart, but something more, a being of flesh and dream, of memory and prophecy, of past and future intertwined. The mountain remembered, and through its remembrance, Dagoth Ur was reborn. The dreams had served their purpose, preparing the way for his return, weakening the barriers between his realm and the waking world. And as he rose from his long slumber, his dreams reached out with greater force, touching the minds of all who lived in the shadow of Red Mountain, calling to them, promising them a place in the new world he would create. The Sixth House, once forgotten, was rising again, not as a political entity, but as a movement, a cult, a force of nature. And at its head stood Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, whose dreams had kept his memory alive through centuries of silence, whose will had shaped the unconscious minds of generations, whose patience had outlasted the very history that sought to erase him. The mountain remembered, and soon, all of Vvardenfell would remember as well. In the quiet corners of Velothi shrines, wise women traced symbols in ash, recalling visions of a masked figure, neither wholly alive nor dead, who would return when the world's wounds reopened. These shrines, carved from black volcanic stone and hidden among the twisting canyons of Vvardenfell, offered sanctuary from both the harsh winds and the watchful eyes of the tribunal. Here, the air was heavy with incense and memory, the flicker of candles casting shifting patterns across ancient murals. The wise women, guardians of forgotten traditions, gathered in the hush of dusk, their voices low and measured as they prepared for the evening's rites. They drew intricate glyphs into the ash scattered across the altar, each symbol a fragment of prophecy, each line a bridge to the past. Their hands moved with practiced reverence, guided by knowledge passed down through generations. The ash itself, gathered from the sacred slopes of Red Mountain, was believed to carry echoes of the mountain's memory, a memory that lingered in the land long after the Sixth House had faded from mortal recollection. As the symbols took shape, the wise women chanted softly, their words weaving old Velothi prayers with the names of ancestors and the half-remembered verses of prophecy. It was in these moments of ritual that the visions would come. The air would grow still, the flames would gutter, and a hush would descend upon the shrine. Eyes closed, the wise women would see him, the masked figure, his face obscured by gold and shadow, standing at the threshold between worlds. He was neither wholly alive nor dead, his presence both comforting and unsettling. In the visions, he moved through the ruins of memory, his footsteps stirring the ash, his voice echoing with the promise of return. The wise women understood that this figure was no ordinary spirit, but the Sharmat, Dagoth Ur, whose fate was bound to the mountain and to the wounds of the world itself. They saw him in dreams, standing at the heart of Red Mountain, his hand resting upon the pulsing heart of Lorkhan. They saw the land split open, rivers of ash pouring forth, and the sky darkened by storms that whispered his name. Yet, in these visions, there was also a sense of longing, of sorrow, as though Dagoth Ur himself mourned the pain of the world and the burden of prophecy. The elders spoke of a time when the world's wounds would reopen, when old betrayals and ancient griefs would rise again, demanding reckoning. The wise women read these omens in the patterns of falling ash, in the restless dreams of their people, and in the subtle shifts of the mountain's breath. They believed that the return of the masked figure would mark the beginning of a new age, one shaped by the choices of mortals and the memory of gods. In the silence of the shrine, the wise women shared their visions with one another, piecing together the fragments of prophecy like shards of broken glass. They remembered the stories of the Sixth House, of Dagoth Ur's fall and the Tribunal's rise, of the promises made and broken beneath the mountain shadow. They spoke of the Heart of Lorkhan, the divine spark that pulsed in the darkness, and of the power that could heal or destroy the world. As the night deepened, the wise women tended the sacred fire, feeding it with offerings of salt and bone. They whispered prayers for guidance, for wisdom, for the strength to face the coming storm. They knew that the world was changing, that the old wounds were stirring, and that the masked figure would soon return. Yet, in their hearts, they held the hope that through remembrance and ritual, through the quiet work of healing, they might help guide their people through the darkness and into the dawn. And so, in the quiet corners of Velothi shrines, the wise women continued their vigil, tracing symbols in ash, recalling visions of the masked figure who would return when the world's wounds reopened. The mountain remembered, and so did they, guardians of prophecy, keepers of memory, waiting for the day when the dreams of the Sharmat would once again shape the fate of Vvardenfell. The second prophecy foretold the coming of the sleepers, those who would hear Dagoth Ur's call in their dreams, their minds touched by a distant, persistent song that grew louder with every passing night. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In remote Ashlander camps and bustling Dunmer towns alike, a subtle unease crept into the hearts of the people. At first, the afflicted simply tossed and turned in their beds, waking with a sense of restlessness they could not explain. But soon, the dreams became more vivid, more insistent. They were filled with visions of a masked figure standing atop Red Mountain, his arms outstretched, his voice a low, hypnotic chant that echoed through the mind like the tolling of a distant bell. Those first touched by the prophecy were often the most sensitive, wise women, shamans, and those who had always felt the pulse of the land in their bones. They would wake in the night, breathless and trembling, unable to shake the memory of a song that seemed to come from the very heart of the mountain. The melody was haunting, neither joyful nor mournful, but something older, deeper, woven from the same fabric as the ash that blanketed Vvardenfell. It was a song of longing and loss, of power and promise, and it called to the deepest parts of the soul. As the nights passed, the song grew stronger. More and more people found themselves caught in its web. Farmers and merchants, warriors and children, all began to share the same dreams. In these visions, they wandered the ashen slopes of Red Mountain, drawn ever upward by the sound of the masked figure's voice. Some awoke with tears on their cheeks, others with a sense of awe or terror, but all felt changed, as if a part of them had been claimed by something vast and unseen. The afflicted became known as the sleepers. At first, their condition was a curiosity, whispered about in markets and temples. But as their numbers grew, so did the fear. The sleepers spoke in riddles, their words laced with fragments of prophecy and half-remembered songs. They would fall into trances at odd moments, their eyes glazing over as they listened to a music no one else could hear. Some wandered away from their homes, drawn inexorably toward Red Mountain, their feet bleeding, their voices murmuring the name of Dagoth Ur. The temple tried to intervene, sending priests and healers to tend to the afflicted. But the sleepers could not be cured. Holy water and prayer were powerless against the dreams, and the priests themselves began to succumb, their faith no shield against the relentless call. The tribunal's agents grew desperate, rounding up the sleepers and confining them in guarded shrines, but the song only grew louder, echoing through stone and steel, breaking down the barriers between waking and dreaming. In the Ashlander camps, the wise women gathered to discuss the prophecy. They remembered the old stories, the warnings passed down through generations, that when the world's wounds reopened, the Sharmat would return, and his dreams would claim the minds of mortals. They saw the signs in the patterns of falling ash, and the restless movements of the Gur herds, and the uneasy silence that settled over the land at dusk. The sleepers, they said, were not cursed, but chosen heralds of a new age, their dreams a bridge between the world of flesh and the world of spirit. The sleepers themselves felt this truth in their bones. Though many suffered, tormented by visions they could not escape, others embraced their role, gathering in secret to share their dreams and await the coming of Dagoth Ur. They painted his symbols on cave walls, built shrines of bone and ash, and sang the song that haunted their sleep. To outsiders, they seemed mad, but within their race, there was a sense of purpose, a certainty that they were part of something greater than themselves. As the prophecy unfolded, the song grew louder still, spreading beyond Vvardenfell to the farthest corners of Morrowind. Travelers brought tales of entire villages falling silent, their inhabitants lost in dreams. Merchants spoke of strange processions moving through the night, the sleepers walking in single file toward the mountain, their faces serene, their eyes unseeing. Even the animals seemed to sense the change. Cliff racers circled the peak in great flocks, and the Nyxhounds howled at the moon, their voices mingling with the song that filled the night. The tribunal could do nothing to stop the spread. Their ghost fence flickered and weakened, unable to hold back the tide of dreams. The priests grew fearful, their prayers unanswered, their faith shaken. Some fled the cities, seeking refuge in the wilderness, while others joined the ranks of the sleepers, surrendering to the call they could no longer resist. In the heart of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur listened to the song of his sleepers, their dreams feeding his power, their minds joining with his in a chorus that echoed through the land. He saw through their eyes, felt their hopes and fears, and guided them toward the fulfillment of the prophecy. The world was changing, the old wounds reopening, and the Sharmat's return was at hand. The coming of the sleepers marked the beginning of the end, the first sign that the balance of power in Morrowind was shifting, that the dreams of Dagoth Ur would soon become reality. And as the song grew ever louder, the people of Vvardenfell could only listen, helpless, as the prophecy unfolded, night after restless night. Villages awoke to strange murmurs, and travelers spoke of ash storms that whispered secrets, of shadows that moved with purpose along the slopes of the mountain. In the early hours before dawn, when the world was still and the air heavy with the scent of cooling embers, the people of Vvardenfell found themselves roused by voices that seemed to drift through the walls of their homes. The murmurs were never quite clear, never quite loud enough to be understood, yet they pressed at the edge of consciousness like the memory of a forgotten song. Mothers clutched their children close, elders whispered prayers to the tribunal, and all listened with unease as the wind carried fragments of language, half-formed words, names from ancient stories, and the unmistakable cadence of prophecy. As the sun rose, the land itself seemed changed. The ash storms, once a familiar hazard of life near Red Mountain, grew stranger and more unpredictable. They came not with the usual violence, but with an eerie deliberation, as if guided by an unseen will. The ash fell in swirling patterns, tracing symbols across rooftops and doorways, collecting in the hollows of tree roots and the crevices of stone. Those who ventured out into the storms claimed to hear voices in the wind, soft, insistent, and hauntingly familiar. The voices spoke of return and remembrance, of wounds unhealed and destinies unfulfilled. Travelers moving between villages reported sights that defied explanation. Shadows moved along the slopes of Red Mountain, not cast by any living thing, but shifting with intent. At night, fires flickered in places long abandoned, and the silhouette of a masked figure was glimpsed among the rocks, always just beyond the reach of torchlight. Some said they saw entire processions, lines of silent figures trudging through the ash, their faces hidden, their steps guided by a purpose none could name. The wise women and seers, already troubled by the dreams of the sleepers, gathered in their shrines to consult the omens. They read the patterns left by the ash, the way it settled in spirals and whirls, and found messages hidden within. The mountain, they said, was speaking, remembering the past and warning of what was to come. The murmurs were not random, but echoes of ancient vows and broken promises, the voices of those who had once served the Sixth House and those who had opposed it. In the markets and meeting halls, the people spoke in hushed tones of the changes they felt in the land. Crops withered in the fields, their leaves coated in a fine, silvery dust. Animals grew restless, their eyes wide and unblinking, as if they too sensed the presence that now watched from the mountain. Children, ever sensitive to the unseen, drew pictures in the ash, strange symbols in the outline of a masked face, always the same, always watching. As the days passed, the storms grew more frequent, and the whispers more urgent. Some villagers began to disappear, slipping away in the night, drawn by dreams they could not resist. Those who remained found themselves plagued by visions, memories not their own, of battles fought beneath a blood-red sky, of voices raised in song and in sorrow. The boundaries between waking and dreaming blurred, and all of Vvardenfell seemed caught in a spell woven from ash and memory. The Tipple sent priests to investigate, but their prayers brought no relief. The ghost fence flickered and pulsed with a strange energy, as if the mountain itself was testing its strength. The priests returned with tales of shadows that moved against the wind, of voices that mocked their incantations, and of a presence that grew stronger with each passing night. In the heart of the Ashlands, the wise women traced new symbols in the dust, seeking guidance from the ancestors. They saw visions of the masked figure, Dagoth Ur, moving through the storms, his eyes burning with the light of the heart. They heard his voice in the wind, calling the lost and the lonely, promising them a place in the new world he would create. The people of Vvardenfell lived in fear and fascination, caught between the old stories and the new reality. The ash storms whispered secrets, and the shadows moved with purpose, as if the land itself was awakening to the memory of all it had lost. And in the quiet moments before dawn, when the world was still and the murmurs faded, the people listened and wondered what the mountain would remember next, and whether they would be strong enough to face the truths that drifted down with the ash. In the heart of the ghost fence, tribunal priests watched the barrier flicker and fade, sensing a presence stirring beneath the stone, a presence that had waited centuries for its time to return. The ghost fence, that shimmering wall of divine energy and ancient sorcery, had long stood as both shield and warning. Its pale blue light encircled the blighted slopes of Red Mountain, humming with the power of the tribunal and the prayers of countless faithful. For generations, it had kept at bay the corruption that festered within, holding back the ashen winds, the twisted creatures, and the malignant will that brooded in the mountain's heart. But now, in the deep hours of the night, when the world was quiet and the only sound was the low, mournful wind, the priests who tended the ghost fence felt a change. At first it was only a subtle tremor, a faint distortion in the air, as if the barrier itself were drawing breath. The priests, robed in their ceremonial garb, patrolled the perimeter with lanterns held high, their faces drawn and weary. They recited the old incantations, voices wavering as they sought to reinforce the weakening wards. Yet, for all their efforts, the light of the ghost fence flickered, pulsing in time with a heartbeat that did not belong to any living thing. It was as though the mountain itself were awakening, its ancient wounds throbbing beneath the surface. The more attuned among the tribunal's servants, those who had spent years in meditation and silent communion with the divine, felt it first. A pressure behind the eyes, a chill that crept along the spine, a sense of being watched by something vast and patient. They whispered to one another in the shadowed corners of their shrines, exchanging stories of strange dreams and visions. A masked figure moving through halls of fire and stone, a voice that spoke in riddles and promises, a presence that pressed against the boundaries of the waking world. As the days passed, the phenomena grew more pronounced. The ghost fence would dim without warning, its light guttering like a candle in a draught. Sometimes, in the midst of their rituals, the priests would see shapes moving on the other side of the barrier, shadows that twisted and writhed, never quite resolving into anything familiar. The air grew thick with the scent of scorched earth and old blood, and the ground itself seemed to tremble beneath their feet. The high priest convened in secret, poring over ancient texts and faded scrolls. They sought guidance in the words of Sotha Sil, in the prophecies of Almalexia, in the cryptic verses left behind by Vivek. But the answers were elusive, hidden beneath layers of metaphor and myth. What they did know was this: the power that stirred beneath Red Mountain was not new, but old beyond reckoning. It was the same force that had driven the Chimer to war, that had shattered the unity of the great houses, that had nearly undone the tribunal themselves. Some among the priests dared to speak the name that had been forbidden for centuries, Dagoth Ur. They recalled the stories of the Sharmat, the betrayer who had bound himself to the Heart of Lorkhan, who had survived death and exile to become something more and less than mortal. They remembered the warnings of the wise women and the omens read in the patterns of falling ash. The return of Dagoth Ur, they whispered, would herald the reopening of the world's wounds, the breaking of old wards, and the resurgence of ancient evils. In the nights that followed, the priests kept vigil at the ghost fence, their prayers growing more desperate as the barrier weakened. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, they could hear voices on the other side, soft, insistent, and strangely familiar. The voices spoke of dreams and destiny, of pain and renewal, of a world remade in fire and ash. Some priests were drawn to the sound, their eyes glazing over as they pressed their hands against the barrier, feeling the pulse of the mountain through the cold, humming stone. The people of Vvardenfell, too, sensed the change. The ash storms grew fiercer, the blight spread farther, and the dreams of the sleepers grew more vivid. Rumors spread of shadows moving in the night, of masked figures glimpsed on the slopes, of a song that echoed through the valleys and the minds of the faithful. The wise women warned that the time foretold in prophecy was at hand, that the world's wounds were reopening, and that the Sharmat's return was inevitable. And so, in the heart of the ghost fence, the priests watched and waited, their hope flickering like the light of the barrier itself. They knew that the presence stirring beneath the stone was not merely a threat, but a reckoning, a force that would test the strength of gods and mortals alike. The mountain remembered, and soon, all of Vvardenfell would remember as well. The time of waiting was over. The time of prophecy had come. The third prophecy warned of the Corprus disease, a blight that would twist flesh and spirit, marking those chosen by Dagoth Ur as both cursed and blessed, their suffering a sign of the Sharmat's awakening. It began as a whisper in the dreams of the sleepers, an ache, a fever, a sense of something lurking beneath the skin. In the shadow of Red Mountain, where the air was thick with ash and the wind carried the scent of ancient secrets, the first afflicted awoke to find their bodies changed. Fingers swollen and twisted, skin mottled and cracked, eyes burning with a feverish light. The priests of the tribunal called it a curse, a punishment for heresy or the result of meddling with forbidden magics. But the wise women and Ashlanders, who remembered the old prophecies, saw something deeper in the suffering. Corprus was not like other diseases. It did not kill quickly, nor did it spread in predictable patterns. It moved in waves, striking the devout and the outcast alike, its progress marked by dreams of the masked figure and the pulsing Heart of Lorkhan. The afflicted spoke in riddles, their voices thick and strange, as if another will spoke through them. They saw visions of fire and shadow, of a world remade in the image of the mountain. Some wandered away from their homes, drawn inexorably toward Red Mountain, their bodies reshaping themselves with every step. The tribunal temple was powerless to halt the spread. Their healers tried every remedy known to mare and man, herds, prayers, powerful enchantments, but nothing could touch the heart of the blight. The disease resisted all attempts at cure, as if it were protected by a will greater than any mortals. The afflicted grew in number, and soon, entire villages were abandoned, their streets haunted by the slow, shuffling steps of those who had become something more and less than mortal. Yet within the suffering, there was a strange kind of grace. Some of the afflicted found their minds sharpened, their senses heightened, their dreams filled with knowledge they could not have learned by any natural means. They spoke of secrets buried beneath the mountain, of the true nature of the heart, of the coming of the Nerevarine and the end of the old order. These prophets were both feared and revered, shunned by their kin, yet sought out by those desperate for answers. The wise women, reading the omens in the patterns of falling ash, saw in Corprus the fulfillment of the third prophecy. The disease was not merely a punishment, but a sign, a mark placed by Dagoth Ur himself upon those chosen to witness the new age. Their twisted bodies were the outward sign of an inward transformation, a breaking and remaking of the self in the image of the Sharmat. To suffer Corprus was to be touched by prophecy, to become a living vessel for the dreams of Red Mountain. As the blight spread, so too did fear and superstition. Some believed the afflicted to be contagious and drove them from their homes with stones and curses. Others saw them as holy and gathered to hear their ravings, hoping to glean some fragment of truth from their fevered words. The line between curse and blessing blurred, and all of Vvardenfell was caught in the grip of uncertainty. In the deepest chambers of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur watched the progress of the disease with satisfaction. Through Corprus, his will reached out into the world, twisting flesh and spirit, marking the chosen as his own. The suffering of the afflicted fed his power, and their dreams became part of his own. The prophecy was unfolding as it must, and the world was being remade according to the vision of the Sharmat. The tribunal, desperate to contain the blight, redoubled their efforts at the ghost fence, pouring their power into the weakening barrier. But the mountain's will was relentless, and the disease slipped through every crack, every weakness, spreading like a shadow across the land. The priests began to dream of Corprus themselves, and some awoke to find their bodies changing, their minds filled with the song of Dagoth Ur. The afflicted gathered in hidden places, drawn together by dreams and necessity. In the ruins of ancient Velothi towers, in the hollows of the ash wastes, they formed communities of the blighted, living on the edge of the world. Here, they shared their visions, cared for one another, and awaited the fulfillment of the prophecy. Some believed that their suffering would end with the coming of the Nerevarine, the hero foretold in the oldest stories. Others believed that they would be rewarded in the new world that Dagoth Ur would create. The land itself seemed to reflect the progress of the disease. The ash storms grew fiercer, the blight spread to plants and animals, and the very stones of Vvardenfell seemed to pulse with a sickly light. The wise women warned that the world's wounds were reopening, that the time of reckoning was at hand. The third prophecy had come to pass, and with it, the promise of transformation and the threat of destruction. Corprus was more than a disease. It was a sign, a harbinger, a test. Those who bore its mark walked the line between curse and blessing, between death and rebirth. Their suffering was a song, echoing through the dreams of Vvardenfell, announcing to all who would listen that the Sharmat was awake, and the world would never be the same. Ashlanders gathered in secret, seeking guidance from wise elders who read omens in the patterns of falling ash, finding hope and fear entwined in the same handful of dust. On moonless nights, far from the watchful eyes of the tribunal and the bustle of city life, the Ashlander tribes would convene in the shelter of their yurts or among the jagged rocks of the ashlands. The air was thick with anticipation and the ever-present scent of sulfur. The world outside seemed suspended, muffled by the endless drift of volcanic ash that blanketed the land, softening every sound and lending a strange hush to the gathering. Here, in the flickering light of oil lamps, the elders sat in silent contemplation, their faces lined with the memory of countless seasons, their eyes reflecting the glow of the embers. The Ashlanders had always been a people apart, keepers of the old ways and the old stories. They mistrusted the grand temples and the promises of the tribunal, choosing instead to place their faith in the wisdom of their ancestors and the signs granted by the land itself. In times of trouble, it was to the wise women and dreamers that the tribes turned, seeking answers in the subtle language of the world, the flight of cliff racers, the cries of Gur, and, most of all, the patterns left by the ceaseless fall of ash. The elders would spread a cloth upon the ground and scatter a handful of ash across its surface, watching as the wind and their breath shaped it into delicate whirls and spirals. Each pattern was a message, a fragment of prophecy. Sometimes the ash settled in the shape of a broken circle, an omen of division, of old wounds reopening. At other times, it formed a line that split and rejoined, a sign that hope and reconciliation might yet be possible. The elders read these signs with care, their interpretations shaped by years of experience in the weight of tradition. As the omens were read, the younger Ashlanders listened in rapt silence, their faces a mixture of hope and dread. They knew the stories of Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, whose dreams had begun to haunt their sleep and the sleep of their kin. They had seen the signs in the land, the ash storms that came with unnatural frequency, the strange lights flickering on the slopes of Red Mountain, the shadows that seemed to move with purpose in the night. The elders spoke of these things in measured tones, neither dismissing the fears of the young nor giving in to panic. There was comfort in the rituals, in the sense that the tribe faced the unknown together. The wise women would pass around a bowl of water, asking each person to gaze into its depths and speak of what they saw. Some saw only their own reflection, but others claimed to glimpse visions, a masked figure walking through fire, a river of ash flowing backward, a sky split by lightning. Each vision was added to the tapestry of prophecy, weighed and considered alongside the omens in the ash. Hope and fear were never far apart in these gatherings. For every sign of doom, there was a sign of resilience, a reminder that the Ashlanders had survived countless hardships before. The elders reminded the tribe of their ancestors' courage, of the strength that came from holding fast to tradition and to one another. They spoke of the possibility that the dreams and the omens were not only warnings, but also guides, signposts pointing the way through the coming darkness. As the night wore on, the Ashlanders would share food and stories, reinforcing the bonds of kinship that held the tribe together. The children fell asleep to the sound of the elders' voices, dreaming of a world where hope and fear danced together in the ash-laden wind. The wise women kept vigil until dawn, watching the patterns shift and change, ever alert for new messages from the land. In the end, the Ashlanders found solace not in certainty, but in the act of seeking. They understood that the future was always written in dust and shadow, that prophecy was a living thing, shaped by the choices and courage of those who listened. And so, with each handful of ash, they found both hope and fear entwined, inseparable, and ever-present in the heart of Vvardenfell. The dream spread, reaching even the distant corners of Tamriel, as merchants and mages alike found themselves haunted by visions of a burning mountain and a voice that promised both ruin and rebirth. What began as a whisper among the Ashlanders soon became a chorus that echoed across the continent. In the bustling markets of Sentinel, traders from Morrowind would pause mid-bargain, their eyes unfocused as the memory of a dream flickered behind their gaze. Red Mountain, crowned in fire, and a masked figure whose words were both a warning and an invitation. In the marble halls of the arcane university, scholars and apprentices alike found their studies interrupted by sudden flashes of vision, ash swirling in the wind, cities crumbling beneath a sky of smoke, in a voice, deep and resonant, promising that the old world would fall so that something new might rise from its ashes. No province was untouched. In the frozen reaches of Skyrim, Nords who prided themselves on their hardiness woke shivering, haunted by dreams of heat and suffocation. In the depths of Black Marsh, even the Hist's ancient consciousness seemed to tremble as Argonian dreamers reported visions not their own, visions of a mountain that burned with unnatural purpose, and a psalm that threatened to drown out the voices of their own ancestors. Across Cyrodiil, from the Imperial City's crowded streets to the lonely watchtowers along the Gerald Mountains, soldiers and citizens alike murmured in their sleep, their words forming fragments of a prophecy they had never learned but could not forget. Merchants, always attuned to the undercurrents of rumor and fear, began to speak in hushed tones of a coming storm. They told tales of caravans lost to sudden ash storms far from Vvardenfell, of goods spoiled by a fine gray dust that seemed to seep from nowhere, and of customers who recoiled at the sight of certain symbols, marks that, unknown to them, echoed the sigils of the Sixth House. Some spoke of fellow traders who had abandoned their routes, driven by a compulsion to travel east toward the source of the dreams, unable to resist the pull of the mountain's call. Mages, more sensitive to the tides of magic that flowed through Nirn, found their spells faltering, their scrying mirrors clouded by visions of fire and shadow. Some attempted to trace the source of the disturbance, only to find themselves drawn into a labyrinth of dreams from which it was difficult to wake. The most powerful among them recognized the signature of an ancient will, a consciousness vast and patient, reaching out across the boundaries of time and space, seeking minds receptive to its message. In the courts of High Rock, Breton seers warned their lords of a coming age of upheaval, their prophecies laced with images of a masked figure in a mountain wreathed in flame. In Valenwood, Bosmere shamans interpreted the sudden blight upon their sacred groves as an echo of the corruption spreading from the heart of Morrowind. Even in distant elsewhere, Khajiit moonsugar dreams turned dark, filled with visions of ash and rain and the promise of transformation. The voice at the heart of these dreams was always the same, calm, commanding, and filled with a terrible certainty. It spoke of endings and beginnings, of suffering and salvation, of a world that must be broken before it could be remade. For some, the voice was a source of dread, a harbinger of doom. For others, it was a beacon of hope, a promise that the pain of the present would give way to a brighter future. As the dream spread, so too did unrest. Old alliances began to fray as suspicion grew between neighbors. Some accused the Dunmer of unleashing a new curse upon the world, while others whispered that the gods themselves had abandoned Tamriel. Yet, beneath the fear, there was also a sense of anticipation, a feeling that the world stood on the brink of something vast and unknown. In the heart of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur listened to the chorus of dreams, his will stretching across the land like the roots of an ancient tree. Through the dreams, he planted seeds of doubt and hope, of fear and longing, preparing Tamriel for the moment when prophecy would become reality. The mountain's shadow grew longer, and all who dreamed of fire and ash knew, in their bones, that the time of change was at hand. Thus, the prophecy spread, not as a story told by mortals, but as a psalm sung by the land itself, a dream that reached across borders and boundaries, binding all of Tamriel to the fate of Red Mountain and the will of the Sharmat. The fourth prophecy spoke of a Nerevarine, a reborn hero who would challenge Dagoth Ur, their fate bound to the heart of the mountain and the secrets hidden within its ancient halls. This prophecy, older than the tribunal, was whispered in the darkness of Ashlander yurts and inscribed in the faded murals of Velothi shrines. It was a story that outlived empires, surviving in the songs of nomads and the anxious prayers of wise women. The prophecy told of a time when the world would be wounded anew, when the dreams of the Sharmat would spill from Red Mountain and threaten to consume all of Vvardenfell. In that hour, a champion would rise, neither wholly of the past nor entirely of the present, but a soul reborn to set right what had once gone terribly wrong. The Ashlanders, keepers of the oldest traditions, guarded the legend of the Nerevarine with equal parts hope and suspicion. They remembered Lord Nerevar, the Hortator, who had once united the Chimer and led them to victory beneath the shadow of Red Mountain. They remembered his betrayal, how his closest allies, the Tribunal, had seized the heart's power for themselves, breaking ancient oaths and setting in motion the cycle of prophecy and doom. The wise women taught that Nerevar's spirit would not rest until the old wounds were healed, until the truth was revealed, and until the betrayer, Dagoth Ur, was faced once more. As the dreams of Dagoth Ur spread like fire through the minds of mortals, the signs of the Nerevarines returned multiplied. Ashlanders watched for omens in the flight of birds, the shape of clouds, and the patterns left by falling ash. Some claimed to have seen a stranger in their dreams, a wanderer with no past, marked by the moon and stars, who walked unafraid through the haunted halls of Red Mountain. Others spoke of a voice that called them to gather, to remember, and to prepare for the coming trial. The Tribunal Temple, fearful of the prophecy's power, denounced the Nerevarine as heresy. They sent inquisitors to silence those who spoke too openly of the old hero, to destroy relics and rewrite histories. Yet, the prophecy could not be erased. It lingered in the hearts of the people, a quiet hope that someone would rise to challenge the Sharmat and restore balance to a land torn by betrayal and blight. Merchants and travelers brought rumors from distant lands, of a masked figure glimpsed in the ash storms, of a wanderer who healed the sick and spoke the old tongue, of a hero who could not die. In the taverns of Balmora and the marketplaces of Vivec, people whispered that the Nerevarine had already come, moving unseen among them, gathering strength for the final reckoning. The wise women, ever watchful, prepared their tribes for the trials ahead. They taught the old songs, recited the prophecies, and reminded the young that destiny was a river with many branches. The Nerevarine, they said, would not be chosen by birth or blood, but by fate and the will of the gods. The hero's path would be marked by suffering and sacrifice, by visions and betrayal, by the courage to face both the living and the dead. Deep within the ancient halls of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur waited. He remembered Nerevar's face, remembered the battle that had changed the world. He watched as the dreams of mortals grew more fevered, as the signs of prophecy multiplied. The Sharmat knew that the cycle was beginning again, that the Nerevarine would come, and that their fates were bound together by the heart's eternal pulse. As the fourth prophecy spread, hope and dread mingled in equal measure. Some prayed for the Nerevarines' arrival, believing that only a hero could break the curse of Corprus and end the blight that choked the land. Others feared what such a reckoning might bring, for prophecy was never gentle, and the mountain's secrets were guarded by blood and fire. In the end, the story of the Nerevarine became a song sung by the land itself, a melody of loss and redemption, of ancient wounds and new beginnings. And as the world waited, breath held and hearts trembling, the prophecy lingered in every shadow, every dream, and every heartbeat beneath the mountain's watchful gaze. As the stars wheeled overhead, the people of Vvardenfell waited, their lives shaped by the slow unfolding of prophecy, each day a quiet step closer to the moment when dreams would become reality. Night after night, the sky above Vvardenfell spun with cold, distant fire. The constellations, warrior, mage, thief, traced their ancient patterns, silent witnesses to the struggles and hopes of mortals below. In the lowland villages, in the high Ashlander camps, the people watched these stars and wondered what omens they might hold. Some believed that the heavens themselves were shifting in response to the turmoil on the land, that the fate of Vvardenfell was written not only in prophecy, but in the slow, inevitable movement of the cosmos. Each day dawned with a hush, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The markets of Balmora and Vvardenfell opened as usual, but voices were softer, laughter rare. Ashlanders in their yurts rose before the sun, tending to their herds and fires, yet their eyes lingered on the horizon, searching for the first glimmer of light or the distant shadow of an ash store. Even the children played more quietly, their games shadowed by the stories they overheard, stories of dreams, of omens, of a hero who might come and a god who might awaken. The wise women and elders felt the weight of these days most keenly. They gathered in the evenings, reading the patterns of falling ash, listening to the wind as it whispered secrets from the mountain. Some nights, the air was so still that the crackle of the campfire seemed impossibly loud. On others, the wind howled down from Red Mountain, rattling doors and scattering embers, as if the mountain itself were restless and patient for the fulfillment of prophecy. In the great cities, the tribunal priests redoubled their rituals, lighting incense and chanting prayers to Vivec, Almalexia, and Sothasil. They watched the flickering ghost fence with anxious eyes, feeling the barrier's power wane and surge in unpredictable rhythms. The faithful came to the temple seeking comfort, but the priest could offer only words, reassurances that rang hollow against the mounting evidence of change. Even the most devout could not ignore the signs, the spreading blight, the growing number of sleepers, the dreams that haunted every household. Merchants and travelers brought news from afar, each tale more unsettling than the last. Caravans from the west spoke of strange dreams plaguing the people of Cyrodiil and Skyrim, of rumors that the troubles of Vvardenfell were spreading across Tamriel like a shadow at sunset. Mages from the imperial city arrived in Vivec, their faces drawn and sleepless, seeking answers in the ancient texts and the shifting patterns of magic that now rippled through the land. All agreed that something vast and unseen was moving, a force that could not be stopped by walls or armies or prayers. Yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, there was also a quiet resolve. The people of Vvardenfell had always been survivors, shaped by a land of fire and ash, of beauty and danger. They remembered the old stories, the times when gods walked among mortals and heroes rose from humble beginnings. They remembered that prophecy was not fate, but a map, a guide for those with the courage to walk its path. In the Ashlands, the tribes prepared for the coming trials. They sharpened their spears, mended their yurts, and taught their children the songs of their ancestors. The wise women reminded them that every prophecy was a story waiting to be finished, and that the ending was never certain until the last word was spoken. In the cities, the Dunmer locked their doors at night and whispered prayers for protection, but they also shared food with neighbors and comforted the sick, finding strength in community and tradition. As the days slipped by, the dreams grew more vivid. Some saw visions of a masked figure standing at the heart of Red Mountain, his eyes burning with a light that was not of this world. Others dreamed of a hero, sometimes a stranger, sometimes themselves, walking into darkness and returning with the dawn. The boundaries between waking and dreaming blurred, and all of Vvardenfell seemed caught in a spell woven from hope and fear. And so, beneath the turning stars, the people waited. They waited for the Nerevarine, for the fulfillment of prophecy, for the moment when dreams would become reality and the fate of their world would be decided. Each day was a quiet step closer, each night a reminder that the future was coming, one heartbeat, one breath, one dream at a time. In the deep chambers of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur dreamed of a new world, one where gods and mortals would be joined in purpose, and the wounds of the past would heal beneath a sky of falling ash. Within the volcanic heart of Vvardenfell, far below the choking ash clouds and the flickering ghost fence, the sanctum of Dagoth Ur pulsed with a strange, living energy. Here, stone corridors wound through ancient Dunmer ruins, their walls etched with forgotten runes and the lingering scent of lost magics. The air was thick with heat and the ever-present thrum of the Heart of Lorkhan, whose divine pulse echoed through every chamber, every shadow, every dream. Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, neither wholly alive nor dead, lay at the center of this labyrinth, his presence woven into the very stone. He dreamed not as mortals dream, but as one who had tasted the power of the gods and survived the shattering of his own soul. In his dreams, the boundaries between waking and sleeping, between memory and prophecy, dissolved. He saw the world as it was, as it had been, and as it might yet become. He dreamed of a world remade, not in the image of the tribunal, whose power he saw as stolen and corrupt, but in a vision born of fire and ash, of pain and healing. In these dreams, the people of Vvardenfell were not divided by house or creed, not shackled by ancient betrayals, but united in purpose. The wounds left by the breaking of the heart, by the lies of gods and the suffering of mortals, would be closed at last. The ash that fell from the sky would not be a curse, but a blessing, a sign of renewal and transformation. In his solitude, Dagoth Ur reached out with his will, his thoughts drifting on the currents of the heart's power. He touched the dreams of the sleepers, whispering promises of a new dawn, of a world where pain was not wasted, but made sacred. To the afflicted, he offered solace. To the ambitious, power. To the lost, purpose. His voice was a song in the blood, a memory in the bones, a hope that lingered even in despair. He remembered the old days, before the tribunal's betrayal, when he had stood beside Nerevarine and the other great lords. He remembered the moment when everything changed, when the heart's power was seized, when trust was broken, and when he was cast down into darkness. The pain of that moment was a wound that never fully healed, but in his dreams, Dagoth Ur saw a path to redemption, not only for himself, but for all of Morrowind. His vision was not one of simple conquest or revenge. He did not wish merely to unseat the tribunal or punish the houses, but to create a new order, one in which the power of the heart would be shared, not hoarded. In this world, gods and mortals would work together, each lending their strength to the healing of the land. The blight and the ash would become tools of transformation, burning away the old and making way for the new. He saw the Nerevarine, the prophesied hero, moving through the halls of Red Mountain, facing trials and temptations, bearing the weight of prophecy and memory. In some dreams, the Nerevarine was an enemy, a threat to be destroyed. In others, a kindred spirit, a fellow sufferer, someone who might understand the pain of betrayal and the longing for wholeness. Dagoth Ur's dreams were filled with visions of confrontation and reconciliation, of battles fought and wounds healed, of endings that were also beginnings. As the heart of Lorkhan pulsed, Dagoth Ur's dreams became more vivid, more urgent. He saw the world outside changing, ash storms sweeping across the land, the ghost fence flickering, the sleepers multiplying. He felt the hopes and fears of the people, their longing for deliverance, their terror of what was to come. He reached out to them in dreams, offering a vision of unity, of a world where the pain of the past was not forgotten, but transformed into strength. In these deep chambers, beneath the weight of stone and prophecy, Dagoth Ur dreamed of healing, not the simple mending of wounds, but the forging of something new from the ashes of the old. He dreamed of a sky dark with ash, not as a sign of death, but as a promise of rebirth. He dreamed of a world where gods and mortals walked together, where the mistakes of the past were acknowledged and forgiven, and where the future was shaped by the courage to dream again. And as he dreamed, the heart of Lorkhan beat on, its rhythm echoing through the mountain, through the land, through the dreams of all who lived in the shadow of Red Mountain. The world waited, balanced on the edge of prophecy, as Dagoth Ur's vision unfolded in the silence beneath the ash-laden sky. The fifth prophecy spoke of choice, that even in the face of destiny, mortals could shape their own path, their actions rippling outward like stones cast into a still pool. This prophecy, unlike those that came before, did not speak in terms of heroes and villains, of fated victories or inevitable ruin. Instead, it whispered of the quiet power that lay within every heart, the ability to choose, to act, and to change the course of events, even when all seemed foreordained. It was a prophecy that belonged not to the gods or the great houses, but to the people themselves, who lived their lives beneath the shadow of Red Mountain and the slow turning of the stars. In the villages and cities of Vvardenfell, this truth revealed itself in countless small moments. A mother, hearing her child cry out from a nightmare, chose to comfort rather than chide, passing on a gentleness that would echo through generations. A young Ashlander, torn between loyalty to tribe and curiosity about the world beyond, decided to leave his home and seek his fortune, his journey setting in motion friendships and feuds that would shape the fate of many. Even the priests of the tribunal, so often bound by ritual and tradition, found themselves faced with choices, whether to cling to the old ways or to risk change in the hope of salvation. The wise women of the Ashlands taught that prophecy was a map, not a prison. The stars might show the shape of things to come, but it was the choices of mortals that filled in the details, that gave meaning to the journey. Around their fires, they told stories of those who had defied expectation, the outcast who became a leader, the enemy who became a friend, the lost soul who found redemption in the most unlikely of places. Each story was a reminder that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope could be found in the simple act of choosing. In the deep chambers of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur too understood the power of choice. Though he dreamed of a world remade in his image, he knew that his vision could not come to pass without the will of others. He reached out in dreams, offering power, purpose, and belonging to those who felt lost or abandoned. Some accepted, becoming his sleepers, his prophets, his warriors. Others resisted, clinging to their own sense of self, their own dreams for the future. Each decision, each act of acceptance or defiance, sent ripples through the world, shaping the unfolding of prophecy in ways even the Sharmat could not fully predict. The Nerevarine, the hero foretold in the fourth prophecy, stood as the ultimate symbol of mortal choice. Though destiny called, though the stars themselves seemed to demand a certain path, the Nerevarine's journey was marked by countless decisions: whom to trust, whom to spare, whether to forgive or to seek vengeance. Every choice carried weight, every action changed the world, sometimes in ways that could not be foreseen. In this, the Nerevarine was not alone. All who lived in Vvardenfell, from the humblest Ur herder to the mightiest sorcerer, played their part in the great tapestry of fate. As the fifth prophecy spread, it brought with it a quiet revolution. People began to see themselves not as pawns in the games of gods and kings, but as agents of their own destiny. They took risks, forged new alliances, and dared to hope for a better future. Some failed, and some succeeded, but all left their mark upon the world, their actions rippling outward, changing the shape of things to come. The stars continued to wheel overhead, the mountain continued to brood, and the dreams of gods and mortals alike continued to unfold. Yet, beneath it all, the fifth prophecy endured, a reminder that, even in the face of destiny, the power to choose remained. And so, the people of Vvardenfell lived their days with a new sense of purpose, each step a quiet act of defiance, each choice a stone cast into the still pool of fate, sending ripples outward into the unknown. Pilgrims climbed the slopes of the mountain, seeking answers in the silence, their footsteps muffled by ash, their prayers carried away by the wind. The journey began in the lowlands, where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and distant smoke. Here, the first light of dawn revealed small bands of travelers, Dunmer and Ashlanders, outlanders, and the faithful, moving quietly through the scrub and twisted roots, each clutching a talisman or a bundle of offerings. They came from all corners of Vvardenfell, from the bustling streets of Balmora, the windswept yurts of the Urshalaku, and the lonely fishing villages along the inner sea. Some walked alone, lost in thought. Others moved in hushed groups, their voices barely rising above the soft crunch of ash beneath their boots. As they climbed, the land changed. The low, rolling hills gave way to jagged ridges and ancient lava flows, their black surfaces scoured by centuries of wind and storm. The sky grew darker, the clouds tinged with the ever-present red of the mountain's breath. The air was thin and dry, each inhalation carrying a faint taste of sulfur. The further they ascended, the more the world seemed to fall away behind them, until only the mountain remained, a vast, brooding presence, its slopes veiled in drifting curtains of ash. The silence here was profound, broken only by the occasional cry of a cliff racer or the distant rumble of the earth. It was in this silence that the pilgrims sought their answers, believing that the mountain, ancient and eternal, might speak to those who listened with open hearts. Some paused at shrines carved into the rock, lighting candles and leaving offerings of salt, bone, and precious stones. They knelt in prayer, their words lost to the wind, their hopes and fears rising with the smoke. For many, the climb was an act of penance, a way to atone for sins real or imagined, to seek forgiveness from the tribunal or the ancestors. Others came in search of visions, hoping that the thin air and the nearness of the heart would open their minds to prophecy. The wise women and elders taught that the mountain was a place where the veil between worlds grew thin, where dreams and reality mingled, and where a pilgrim might glimpse the truth of their own soul. Some pilgrims spoke of strange encounters on the slopes, a masked figure glimpsed in the mist, a voice that whispered their name, a sudden warmth that drove away the chill. Others found only silence, the mountain offering no answers, only the endless fall of ash and the slow, steady beating of their own hearts. Yet, even in silence, there was meaning. The climb itself became a meditation, each step a prayer, each breath a surrender to the will of the mountain. At night, the pilgrims made camp among the rocks, huddling together for warmth as the stars wheeled overhead. The firelight flickered on their faces, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. Some shared stories of dreams that had led them here, of omens seen in the patterns of falling ash, of ancestors who had made the climb before them. Others sat in silence, listening to the wind as it swept down from the summit, carrying with it the distant sound of chanting, the echo of prayers offered by those who had come before. As dawn broke, the journey resumed. The higher they climbed, the more the world below seemed to fade, until only the mountain and the sky remained. The ash grew deeper, swirling around their feet, clinging to their clothes and skin. The air was thin, every step an effort, every breath a struggle. Yet, the pilgrims pressed on, driven by faith, by hope, by the need to find meaning in a world shaped by prophecy and loss. At the summit, where the wind howled and the ash fell like snow, the pilgrims gathered in a rough circle, their faces turned toward the heart of the mountain. Here, in the shadow of Red Mountain, they offered their prayers, not for themselves alone, but for all of Vvardenfell, for the wounded land and the wounded hearts of its people. Some wept, overcome by the weight of their journey. Others stood in silence, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, the ancient heartbeat of the Heart of Lorkhan. And when they descended, their footsteps traced new paths in the ash, their prayers lingering in the wind. Some carried with them visions or answers, others only more questions. Yet all returned changed, marked by the silence of the mountain and the knowledge that, in seeking answers, they had become part of the prophecy themselves, a living thread woven into the story of Vvardenfell, their choices and prayers rippling outward like stones cast into a still pool, shaping the fate of the land beneath the ever-falling ash. Within the heart chamber, the Heart of Lorkhan pulsed with ancient power, its rhythm echoing the heartbeat of the world, its secrets waiting for those brave enough to listen. Deep beneath the ashen slopes of Red Mountain, where the air shimmered with heat and the stone walls glowed with a faint, unnatural light, the Heart of Lorkhan hung suspended above the molten earth. It was more than a relic, more than a source of power. It was the wound at the center of the world, the engine of creation and betrayal, the source of both hope and ruin for all of Morrowind. The chamber itself was a place out of time, carved by hands long vanished, echoing with the memories of gods and mortals who had come seeking answers, vengeance, or redemption. The heart's pulse was not merely physical, but spiritual, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate in the bones of any who drew near. It was said that those who stood in its presence could feel the world's sorrow and longing, the echo of Lorkhan's sacrifice, and the weight of every choice that had shaped the fate of Nur. The walls of the chamber were inscribed with ancient glyphs, their meanings half lost to time, but their power undiminished. The runes glowed faintly, responding to the rhythm of the heart, as if the stone itself remembered the secrets it had been made to keep. If you had ever reached this place, the path to the heart chamber was fraught with peril, twisting tunnels filled with ash vampires and the restless spirits of those who had perished in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and the metallic tang of magic. Every footstep echoed, every breath felt borrowed. Yet, for those who pressed on, drawn by prophecy or desperation, the heart awaited a promise and a warning, a question and an answer. Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, lingered here, his form both mortal and divine, his mind entwined with the heart's power. He listened to its song, dreaming of a new world where the pain of the past would be healed, where gods and mortals would walk together beneath a sky of falling ash. In his dreams, the heart was not a curse, but a gift, a chance to remake the world, to erase old wounds and forge a future shaped by will and vision. Yet, the heart's power was not easily tamed. It whispered of possibility and danger, of creation and destruction, of the thin line between salvation and damnation. For the Nerevarine, the prophesied hero, the heart chamber was the end of a long journey and the beginning of a greater trial. Here, all the choices made and all the dreams dreamed converged. The heart offered power beyond imagining, the chance to change the world, or to destroy it. Its secrets were not given freely. They demanded courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to face the truth of one's own soul. The heart remembered every betrayal, every hope, every act of love and vengeance that had brought mortals and gods alike to this place. As the heart pulsed, its rhythm echoed through the land above. Ash storms raged, the ghost fence flickered, and the people of Vvardenfell felt the tremors of destiny in their sleep. The wise women and dreamers sensed the change, reading omens in the patterns of falling ash, hearing the echo of the heart in the silence between breaths. They knew that the world stood on the brink, that the secrets hidden within the chamber would soon be revealed, and that the fate of all Tamriel hung in the balance. In the heart chamber, time seemed to slow, the boundaries between past and future, dream and reality, blurring in the presence of the heart's power. Those who listened with open hearts heard not only the sorrow of Lorkhan, but the promise of something greater, a world remade, a future forged from the ashes of the old. The heart waited, its secrets patient and eternal, for those brave enough to listen, to choose, and to shape the destiny of the world anew. As prophecy and reality converged, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The fate of Vvardenfell poised between destruction and renewal, between nightmare and waking. The signs were everywhere, woven into the very fabric of the island. The ash storms that once swept the plains with random fury now moved with eerie purpose, tracing invisible paths across the land as if guided by a will older than memory. The ghost fence, that shimmering barrier of divine power, flickered and dimmed, its light wavering like a candle in the wind. The priests who kept vigil at its edge felt the tremors of something vast and ancient stirring beneath the mountain, a presence that pressed against the world like a storm about to break. In the cities and villages, the people of Vvardenfell lived each day in a state of uneasy anticipation. The dreams that had once haunted only the most sensitive now touched everyone, merchants and miners, children and elders, even the proud lords of the great houses. Some awoke in the night, gasping for breath, their minds filled with visions of fire and ruin, of a masked figure standing at the heart of Red Mountain, his voice echoing with both promise and threat. Others found themselves drawn to the old stories, seeking comfort in prophecy, searching for signs that the Nerevarine, the reborn hero, might soon appear. The Ashlanders, ever the keepers of tradition, gathered in secret to consult the wise women and dreamers. They read omens in the patterns of falling ash, in the restless movements of the herds, in the shifting winds that swept down from the mountain. Hope and fear mingled in every handful of dust, for they knew that the time foretold in the oldest prophecies was at hand. The world's wounds were reopening, the Sharmat was awakening, and the fate of all Morrowind hung in the balance. Within the deep chambers of Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur dreamed his dreams of a new world. The Heart of Lorkhan pulsed with ancient power, its rhythm echoing the heartbeat of the land itself. Dagoth Ur's will reached out through the dreams of mortals, binding them to his vision, shaping their fears and hopes into a tapestry of destiny. He saw the coming of the Nerevarine not as an end, but as a beginning, a chance to heal the wounds of the past, to unite gods and mortals in a purpose greater than vengeance or ambition. Yet the mountain's promise of renewal came with a price. The blight spread, twisting flesh and spirit, marking those chosen by Dagoth Ur as both cursed and blessed. The Corprus disease, foretold in the third prophecy, claimed more victims with each passing day, its sufferers wandering the ash wastes in search of meaning, their bodies transformed by the will of the Sharmat. The sleepers, touched by dreams, gathered in hidden places, their voices rising in strange, haunting songs that echoed through the night. The tribunal, once seen as living gods, found their power waning. The people's faith, once unshakable, now trembled beneath the weight of doubt and fear. The priests who tended the ghost fence whispered of visions and omens, of a presence stirring beneath the stone, of the old wounds that would not heal. Some clung to hope, believing that the Nerevarine would bring salvation. Others feared that the end had already begun, that the land itself was slipping into nightmare. As the stars wheeled overhead, the people waited. Each day was a quiet step closer to the moment when dreams would become reality, when prophecy would be fulfilled or broken. The fate of Vvardenfell hung in the balance, poised between destruction and renewal, between the darkness of the past and the uncertain light of the future. In these days of waiting, every choice mattered. The fifth prophecy spoke not only of fate, but of the power of mortal will, the ability to shape the world through action and courage. Pilgrims climbed the slopes of Red Mountain, seeking answers in the silence, their prayers carried away by the wind. The wise listened for the heartbeat of the world, hoping to hear the promise of healing in the rhythm of the heart. And so, as prophecy and reality converged, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The ash fell in silence, the mountain brooded, and all of Vvardenfell waited, poised on the knife's edge between nightmare and waking, between the end of all things and the dawn of something new. The world was ready to be remade, if only there were those brave enough to listen, to choose, and to dream. And so, in the soft hush before dawn, the prophecies of Dagoth Ur lingered, woven into the dreams of mortals in the memory of mountains, waiting for the day when the last secret would be revealed, and the world would awaken once more. The island of Vvardenfell lay shrouded in a gentle gray, the ash storm stilled for a moment, the ever-present wind carrying only the faintest sigh through the ghostly ruins and sleeping villages. In these quiet hours, before the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, the world seemed suspended between breaths, as if all of Tamriel waited with it. The dreams that had haunted so many, of burning mountains, masked figures, and the pulsing heart, drifted at the edges of consciousness, fading but never truly gone. They lingered in the minds of the restless, the hopeful, and the fearful alike, their meanings elusive yet undeniable. Within the yurts of the Ashlanders, wise women sat in silence, their hands still dusted with the ash of last night's omens. They gazed into the embers of dying fires, seeing visions that danced and shimmered just out of reach. In the cities, merchants and mages tossed in their beds, haunted by fragments of prophecy that would not let them rest. Even the priests of the tribunal, cloistered behind the walls of their temples, felt the weight of destiny pressing in, the certainty that the world was on the verge of some great unveiling. Red Mountain itself seemed to slumber, its breath slow and deep, its dreams radiating outward in invisible waves. Beneath its surface, the Heart of Lorkhan pulsed with ancient power, its rhythm echoing through stone and memory, through the veins of the land and the souls of its people. Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, lingered in the depths, his will entwined with the mountains, his vision of a new world woven into the tapestry of fate. He dreamed of unity and transformation, of wounds healed beneath a sky of falling ash, and his dreams touched all who lived in his shadow. Yet, the prophecies were not merely the domain of gods and heroes. They belonged to every soul who listened for meaning in the silence, who searched for hope in the patterns of falling ash, who dared to believe that their choices mattered. The fifth prophecy, the promise of mortal agency, shimmered in the air as surely as the ash that drifted down from the mountain's peak. Each day, each act of kindness or courage or defiance sent ripples through the world, shaping the future in ways both great and small. As dawn approached, the land waited, poised between nightmare and waking, between destruction and renewal. The dreams of the sleepers, the prayers of the pilgrims, the visions of the wise, all mingled in the hush before sunrise. It was a moment outside of time, a breath held by the world itself, as if Vvardenfell and all of Tamriel stood on the threshold of revelation. And when the first light finally touched the ash-covered slopes, the spell was broken. The world stirred, the dreams receded, and the day began anew. Yet, beneath the surface, the prophecies lingered, woven into the memory of mountains and the hearts of mortals, waiting for the day when the last secret would be revealed, and the world, at last, would awaken once more.